Welcome to the Birth Breakdown, a mini-sode series from Her Birth, Her Story. These short episodes are here to open conversations around pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Things I believe every woman deserves to look into, to question, and just to feel empowered by. This isn't about telling you what to do or what's right and what's wrong. It's about giving you space to think, to learn, and to trust yourself a little bit more as you prepare for your birth. Let's break it down. On this episode of the Birth Breakdown, we are going to be diving into the second trimester. Last week, we focused on the first trimester. This week, we'll focus on the second trimester. And next week, we will look into the third trimester. We're just going to be looking into what's happening, maybe medically, physically, and emotionally, and just the important things that you should be looking into during this season of pregnancy. The second trimester runs from week 13 to week 27, and it is considered for a lot of women the honeymoon phase where the nausea is fading, your energy's coming back. Maybe you have more energy or desire to do the things that you wanted to do before pregnancy. You're just starting to feel yourself a little bit more again. Now, I do want to put in a disclaimer here that this does not happen for every single mom. Just because you hit that week 13 does not mean automatically every symptom that you're experiencing goes away. There are many moms, and we've had them here on the podcast, that have experienced nausea the whole entire pregnancy and just have rough pregnancies. So if that is you, I really strongly encourage you to work with your provider, work with your birth team to really figure out if there are any ways to give you relief so that you're not miserable 100% of the time and that your baby is getting the nutrients that it needs. But for many women, this trimester is just kind of like a sweet spot in pregnancy. But even though that it feels easier or it can be a little bit more of a breath of fresh air, this trimester is still packed with a lot of important milestones and decisions that you are going to have to walk through. And this trimester is so important. We had talked about how the first trimester was like the foundation, and this trimester builds on top of that. So a lot of things that you choose to do during this trimester can really set you up for success moving forward when it comes time to birth your baby. So now let's kind of look into what is happening with your baby during this trimester. Well, obviously, your baby is just continuing to grow and the organs are continuing to mature. Your placenta is now fully functioning, which is so cool. And during this time, the baby is swallowing and sucking and just practicing breathing movements. There's also this really cool protective coating on your baby that begins to form that's called vernix, and it's super exciting because you are going to feel your baby move at some point in time in this. Now, I just want to remind you that every woman is different. It depends on your placenta position as well, how big your baby is. Sometimes it can even depend on how many kids you have, but it is so cool to feel that quickening, to feel those little first flutters, and then they just get stronger as time goes on. But you should be feeling that around 16 weeks to 22 weeks. This is also when your baby becomes more proportionate and starts gaining weight more steadily. Now let's look what's happening to mom. Well, your blood volume continues to increase and it's up to about 40 to 50% more than normal, which this can cause dizziness, low blood pressure episodes, nosebleeds, bleeding gums. Your uterus is growing, which could bring on round ligament pain. You could even be having some back and hip discomfort, pressure in your pelvis, because obviously your body is growing and trying to accommodate a human growing inside of you now, and your baby is just continuing to get bigger. Also, you might notice, which this sometimes ends up being kind of shocking for moms, but you might have increased vaginal discharge and skin changes, breast changes, during the latter part of this trimester, you might be experiencing some Braxton Hicks contractions, which, if you don't know what Braxton Hicks contractions are, they're just kind of like the practice contractions. I didn't even know that I was having Braxton Hicks contractions until my midwife had told me that I was experiencing one. Essentially, what I was experiencing was just my belly was just getting rock hard. It didn't feel uncomfortable or anything like that. Like my belly was just getting very hard. And I had no idea that that was a Braxton Hicks contraction because I had always thought that the word contraction just means something intense, something you have to breathe through, something painful, and that was not my experience with the Braxton Hicks. Obviously, talk to your provider just to see if that's what you're walking out. During this time too, your appetite has probably increased. And, a lot of times people joke, whoa, you're eating for two. In a roundabout way, yes, but don't think that you should be sitting down and eating two whole separate meals. That's not the case. But just remember that, yes, you are needing to probably intake more nutrients, not necessarily more food. And this is also when women begin experiencing symptoms of anemia or even gestational diabetes, which brings us to some very important things that you should be looking into. This is such a key preparation window during this trimester. And here are just some major things that are typically happening or that are offered during this trimester. A lot of times around 18 to 22 weeks, they are going to want to do an anatomy scan. And this is just a very detailed ultrasound where they're checking your baby's organs, their brain development, heart structure, your placenta location, amniotic fluid levels. And this is a big milestone appointment because it can just bring reassurance for you. And sometimes it also brings unexpected findings. And it's okay to emotionally prepare for both possibilities. Also, your placenta location, you're going to learn whether your placenta is anterior, posterior, low-lying. And if it's low-lying, this may require some follow-up monitoring. You might want to see your cervical length too. A lot of times they do that during the anatomy scan just because a short cervix can increase the risk of preterm labor. And around 24 to 28 weeks, they are going to be giving you a glucose screening. Now, this is important because this is the gestational diabetes screening, but you need to understand what the test involves. You need to know your options and know what happens if you do screen positive. Just remember, this is not about fear. It's just about being informed. And everybody always talks about that sugary orange drink, but there are other options that you can talk with your provider about. Also during this time, around the 24, 28 week mark, and somewhere in that gap, depending on when your appointments are, they are going to be looking if you are Rh negative or Rh positive. If you are Rh negative, you will likely receive a RhoGAM shot around 28 weeks, and it's just helpful to understand why this is recommended and what it does for you. Next thing that you should look into is the anemia screening. Low iron is very common during this time because your blood volume's increasing. Obviously, your body's doing a lot of work, but they commonly check this in this trimester because they want to treat it now so that they can help prevent complications later on. And fetal movement awareness. By the end of this trimester, you're obviously going to feel more consistent movement from your baby. And this is just a very beautiful time for you to start learning what's normal for your baby, when you should call your provider, and just how to trust your instincts. One of the biggest things during this time that I think is one of the most important things to be looking into is just your emotional and mental preparation. Birth is a marathon. It is not just something that is physical. It is not something that is just spiritual. it is also emotional and mental. Emotional and mental preparation is so important during this trimester. So during this time, birth can start feeling really real. You're getting so excited about the anticipation of holding your baby, but you're also maybe a little bit fearful, or there's fears that start popping up. Maybe fears from past births may come up as well, and your body image just starts to change just because, your body is changing constantly. You may start questioning if the way that you want to give birth, the place that you want to give birth, the people that you're wanting to be in the room, you may start asking, am I making the right decision? This is a great time to just ask yourself, do I truly feel safe with my provider? Do I understand my birth options? Do I want to switch care if something just feels a little bit off? Should I begin childbirth education classes now? This trimester just gives you the space to make empowered changes if necessary. This trimester isn't just a break, it's the foundation building trimester. So this is a great time when you strengthen your body, build up those iron stores, make sure your blood sugars stabilize, and just educate yourself to the extent that you wish to be educated. Choose your birth team intentionally, and just remember too that the people that you have in the room at your birth matter. No matter if it is a family member, a friend, a doula, if it's nurses or a midwife or even an OB, all of those people are going to affect your birth, whether it be positively or negatively. So you want to choose your team with intentionality, and you want to make sure that you guys are all on the same page. And just remember, birth preparation does not start at 38 weeks, 39 weeks. It starts now. I do apologize to any of my listeners who are watching this on YouTube, because if you see a moving blob over here in my shirt, that would be my son who decided to wake up from his nap and is wanting to be very clingy. So that's fine. This is a great example of mom life. And so for my first time moms, I just want to validate some things that you may be experiencing that you had no idea, or that people just don't really talk about a lot. And so even though physically everything seems to be a lot calmer, while yes, that's true, there are just still some things that just don't really get talked about. And the first one is that you might not feel pregnant anymore. And I know that that is so crazy to think about, because this is the second trimester. What do you mean? The nausea fades and you still just might not be showing that much. So you're kind of in between to where you don't really look like you have that baby bump. So you're just in that in between stage where you're not experiencing the nausea anymore, and the movement, you might not be feeling the baby move yet because you're still not far enough along. And there's just this stage, this in-between stage, and you're just constantly thinking oh my gosh, am I still pregnant? Is everything okay? And that quiet, that in-between can often bring on some more anxiety or some more fears that you didn't know that you have. And so that just kind of brings us to the next thing too, which is the anxiety. A lot of times we always talk about the anxiety in the first trimester, how there's just a lot of unseen things going on, but that anxiety can often shift. So obviously in the first trimester, our fear is often centered around potential miscarriage and just making sure that we're doing everything to help the pregnancy and the baby and just not knowing things. Then in the second trimester, it starts to become what if something shows up on the anatomy scan? What if development isn't normal? What if I did something for my baby not to develop right? How am I going to give birth? And it's a lot of this anxiety that can pop up, and no one really prepares for that emotional transition for you, because a lot of times we think once we hit that second trimester, we are golden, good to go. Sometimes that's the truth, but our anxieties just flip a little bit. You may also experience things that feel very alarming that you weren't anticipating, like sharp, round ligament pain, heart palpitations just from your blood volume increasing, leg cramps, and shin splints that wake you up at 2 a.m., and a lot of times constipation and even hemorrhoids. And yes, I'm talking about the hemorrhoids because nobody prepares you about those because they are not fun at all. An increase in discharge makes you question like what's normal and what's not. And sometimes too, because you're constantly feeling more wet, then you're constantly thinking like, oh my gosh, is my water leaking? Why am I so wet? And here is one more thing that just is not talked about enough. You may not feel cute pregnant yet. You may feel puffy. You might be in between sizes where your pre-maternity stuff isn't fitting, but maternity stuff is way too big. And you're not quite showing yet, but not quite yourself either. And it can just play this game with your confidence, this middle stage. And the baby's not moving yet. So it's not this magical butterfly moment right when you hit that second trimester. It can just be a lot on you. And just know that it's okay to feel kind of glum or just kind of bummed out that you're not experiencing that pregnancy glow yet. But just always keep in mind that what you're doing is you're housing your baby, you're building your baby, and taking care of yourself along the way. And that is one of the most amazing things that you can do. So if you're in your second trimester right now, lean into it. Use your energy if you have it. Ask the questions. Advocate early. This season is about preparation, not panic. That's all for today's birth breakdown. If this episode sparked curiosity, affirmed something you've been feeling, or gave you a new perspective, I'd love for you to share it with another mom or mom-to-be who might need it. Make sure you're following Her Birth, Her Story, and if you feel called, leaving a review is one of the best ways to support this space, and it helps these conversations reach more women. Until next time, remember, this is your body, your baby, and your story. We are reclaiming birth one story at a time.